Right, we're transitioning out. Hello, welcome to Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about Halo Infinite. But before we do that, buddy, why don't you tell folks know what it is we do on this podcast?
Well, on this podcast, it's actually pretty simple. We like to talk about games. And I guess I would say the biggest I want to say that like the biggest thing in games right now is Halo Infinite, right? It's the biggest release that just came out yesterday. The Halo Infinite multiplayer just came out yesterday. Um, But maybe it's not the biggest news in games just because there's always so much shit going on.
Yeah, I mean there's like a big. I mean, in games vis-a-vis games, not games vis-a-vis industry shenanigans.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
true. Yeah.
it's probably Halo because like one, we're not in a particular like the Elden Ring network test ended, right, which was pretty big.
Mhm.
Um, but in terms of games, it was a stealth drop, which was pretty. Like if there was rumors, right? But like it was the Halo 20th anniversary, which was the event, and they dropped the beta, without any pre warning, and everybody ran to play, including us.
Including us.
Yep, and this is technically an open beta. Um, it officially launches on December 8th, which I believe when the campaign is also coming out. The multiplayer is free for everyone forever. It's being supported with a battle pass style system, with the new thing, or with the difference here being that the battle pass, you buy it once and you keep it forever. So like even if you're out of season, you can keep running on the battle pass. You can't run, like, you can buy multiple battle passes, but you don't like gain experience on them simultaneously. So like if you play a bunch in the third season, let's say, um, and you had never finished your first season battle pass, you can go back to that. Or if you just wanted to finish your season one battle pass first, that type of. And all the beta progress will roll into the official release progress in 2 weeks.
So
So
all of that is pretty like good news. And honestly,
yeah,
I want to use an aggressive term. I want to call that like groundbreaking or whatever, but it doesn't actually seem all that groundbreaking. It just kind of seems like they've pulled out a lot of the sort of FOMO is something that
yeah,
people talk about a lot with games stuff right now. And part of what animates that, right, is the way that a lot of games are structured around a battle pass, right? If you complete your battle pass, you get the thing, and you have that time, you have like the, oh, I need to go. Like I was considering picking up Fortnite and taking the battle pass because they had an Aquaman skin. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like I want that Aquaman skin, and it's not like I can go back now and get it. I would have had to have done the battle pass 2 years ago, right?
yeah,
So it's kind of nice that they have made it so that you can, uh, always get the rewards that you deserve, I guess.
yeah. No, it's like you said, it's not really groundbreaking, but it's kind of like the next step, the natural advancement of kind of like this model, right? Is a way to do it. And natural advancement maybe isn't the right way to put it, but like a more consumer friendly way to do it, which is not always the thing you expect out of Microsoft. So good on them. Um,
Good on them, yeah.
yeah. It's interesting because like Halo Infinite was delayed a year, right? It was supposed to come out. It was supposed to launch with the Xbox, and honestly, it seems to have coincided with like a shift from Microsoft from a focus on like hardware to like software. Um, you know,
Yeah, they bought Bethesda in that time. They obviously also bought Obsidian. That was before this, but
yeah,
so they've been making big acquisitions. Phil Spector actually tweeted something that says that they may be making another big acquisition soon. People are rumoring that it's Sega, which would be fucking insane if that were to happen.
that would be fucking nuts, right?
I don't think it's happening, but that's what Twitter tells me, man. Right? But yeah,
Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, and on top of that, right? Like it seems like very openly, the focus shifted from the new Xboxes to the Game Pass, right?
yeah.
As their kind of like primary offering. Game Pass is great value. You know, it's I keep my Ultimate Battle Pass up, even though I probably don't use it as much as I should. But like Halo's gonna launch on it, Starfield's gonna launch on it. Um, and it works on PC too, right? So if you essentially, I think they want you to be playing Xbox on your PC or on your Xbox Series X or on your Xbox One. There we go. I can never remember which generation is which with the Xbox. Um, but yeah, and so yeah, we played some Halo yesterday. I played some Halo today. Um, What do you have any initial thoughts?
My high level thought, the high level thought that we all sort of said coming out of this, right? Is how interesting it is that it really feels like Halo, which I think is dumb. It's kind of like, in that in the Spider-Man game when everybody was like, it really makes you feel like Spider-Man. It's like, that's kind of a meaningless statement. And I feel a similar way about just calling this, it really like feels like Halo, but I just kind of haven't had a first person shooter experience that brought me back to those sorts of mechanics, like the Halo 2, Halo 3 era days, and those mechanics in quite a long time, right? And obviously I'm not a huge first person shooter guy. Like I don't play the COD releases, I don't play Battlefield or anything like that. But it seems like over time, it really became Battlefield and Call of Duty that defined what it meant to sort of play, like a first person shooter. And then you have stuff like Apex, PUBG, like
Fortnite.
Fortnite, right? Like these are all kind of coalescing, but none of those ever felt like Halo to me either, right? It felt like they were all kind of modeled after sort of this like heavy COD design for sort of shooters. And so I was really surprised when we were getting back into Halo yesterday, and like cover wasn't a huge thing, right? Like I felt like whenever I was playing COD, I was always very cognizant of cover, and your character is slow, and you can't run and shoot at the same time. Jumping is terrible and not super useful, right? But in Halo, this has like the very flighty jumps, right? um it has the movement speed of my characters felt really quick, right? There's not a lot of I guess chest high cover is really what there is a lot of kind of general regular
Right, and
normal
there's
cover,
not
right?
cover that you like that you like hit the cover button behind, right? Like,
Yeah. That's exactly what I mean, right? Like there's none of that, right? Which is almost kind of like the defining gameplay feature of stuff like, you know, Fortnite or PUBG, right? Where cover-based shooting is kind of the norm. A lot of what Halo seems to do is like I just sort of it's almost kind of like I all in every single combat encounter, right? Like there are some times when I'm getting shot and I go, I don't want this engagement, and I duck behind cover. But more often than not, if I'm getting shot, I am trying to kill the other guy for like as a first order decision, right? Rather than sort of hiding behind cover or anything like that. I'm just trying to get like the damage density, right? To kill him before he kills me, kind of thing. And all of that has created that sort of nostalgic feel, I think, that made Halo Infinite feel like a breath of fresh air, even though it is stale air from 2004.
yeah, I mean,
Compared to the kinds of shooter experiences I've had recently.
and there's a couple other things there too that I think are worth highlighting, right? Like, Halo was kind of like generation defining in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Um, which is weird because like it seems like Gears of War like really set the model for what COD and everything else became that came to be dominant. But like no loadouts, right? Like you pick your weapons up off the ground, but the weapons are in known places, right? Like a lot of
Yep.
this game will revolve like, and we were getting used to it when we were playing, but like revolves around map knowledge and like controlling these points in controlled ways rather than like the BRs have a high amount of randomness to them. Um,
Yeah, and like showing up and like respawning and going, "Oh, the first thing I need to do, I know where I am. I need to go run and pick up this
yeah,
whatever. I don't know the names of the guns yet, but this gun that I have found and I like it a lot. Let's see if it's back up, kind of thing."
Yeah, and on top of your point about like going all in on people, there's also much higher time to kills in this game than I feel like there are in like especially COD. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
like the fact that you even have like kind of a choice as to whether to engage or back off is like a thing that hasn't been super popular. And I think part of the reason why it feels so fresh is because Halo 4 and 5, Halo 5 especially, didn't really feel a lot like Halo, and as a result, were not as popular. They weren't as dominant in the game field. And this feels like it's coming at the right time. Vanguard, excuse me, Call of Duty Vanguard just released. And I don't see anybody really talking about it. I'm sure it'll sell like a billion copies, but probably like half a billion. Slightly less than they usually do because it's not one of the better rated ones.
Yeah. I don't get a sense that it has like a recapture feel to it. Like one of the things that so the game developer Ghostcrawler, who's like the lead dev on WoW for a long time now. He's like a lead dev at Riot. Something that he said is that when games get big enough, they're not looking for acquisition; they're looking for recapture. Right? Chances are, if you are you know, a young adult male in South Korea, you have heard of League of Legends. You have played League of Legends before, right? So it is not about explaining to you what League of Legends fundamentally is. It is about recapturing someone who has probably put a certain number of hours into the game by enticing them to get back into it. And the same thing applies to WoW, it applies to COD, it applies to, so many of these other games with incredibly crazy market penetration, right? What is the new thing that this, WoW expansion, this Call of Duty title, this whatever the thing is that is going to recapture an audience who is already aware of the thing, right? And I feel like with Modern Warfare, right, which was, maybe that was 2 years ago. What was last year?
Last year was hold on, I actually bought these games, so I know. Black Ops. It was Black Ops. Black
Okay,
Ops
yeah,
Cold War
so
was last year. Yeah.
right. Okay, yeah. So with Modern Warfare, I felt that recapture feel a lot. There were a lot of people talking about Modern Warfare.
Right.
Um and also a little bit, I mean, Black Ops, I feel like Warzone is really what dominated the conversation around Black
Yeah.
Ops, right? We obviously did an episode on Warzone. We played Warzone. Um but I basically haven't heard anything when it comes to Vanguard. And it seems like that kind of recapture conversation is happening all around Halo right now, like Halo
So
Infinite.
that's the interesting thing, right? Because you normally would expect that, but like it is like it doesn't have that market penetration anymore, right? Like there are probably a bunch of people who are like, we've been joking this whole time about like back to middle school, right? There are probably a bunch of people in middle school now who are like, "What's a Halo?" Right? Like
That's true. Yeah, I mean, because there's Halo 1, 2, and 3, right? Like the golden era of Halo, I feel like, is Halo 2, Halo 3,
Yeah.
right?
And Halo what
Um
Combat Evolved is also like held in super high regard. It's just, like
yeah, it was
yeah,
just,
that
the first
Halo
one.
Combat Evolved like makes the Xbox a system, right?
Yeah.
Like but like I think you're right. Like the Xbox just was kind of up against the PlayStation 2 and like um even though it's not remembered in quite these terms, basically like it survived on Halo, but like, otherwise whatever.
Yeah,
But
I
the
mean,
360 is
what I'm
Halo
saying
2.
is, like, if I were to approach 20 people and ask them what is your favorite memory of Halo, my bet is that 18 of those 20 answers are going to be revolving around Halo 2 and Halo 3, because
I think
those
you
were
could
the
even
games
just
I feel like.
I think you could cabin that to just Halo 2, right? Like the
Really,
best,
really?
yeah.
Okay, sure, fair enough.
Just because, so like there's like some very specific things there, but like there's like a skill pinnacle that kind of hits around there, right?
Mhm.
Halo 2 is also the launch of achievements, I think, if I remember correctly. It's the launch of the
It was
Xbox.
like Xbox Live, right? Which
Yeah,
was, you know, part of what I think made the original Xbox so appealing was that network functionality, right? Which the PS2 didn't have, at least natively. I think you could get like an add-on for it or whatever, right? But I remember like the legitimate wow moment of going to a friend's house. I had a PS2, right? And going to a friend's house and they going, "Oh, I'm just playing on the internet." And I remember at the time thinking, like, battle.net, because I was playing a bunch of StarCraft back then, right? And they were like, "Yeah, like battle.net, right? But on the console kind of thing." I think that was, I don't think Halo Combat Evolved had that. I think it was Halo 2 that had
I
that
th-
Xbox Live functionality.
I don't think it was as good. It was definitely a big. I think that was also like right around the time where like broadband penetration really hit.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I
uh,
mean, 2004, that also would have been when, like Classic WoW was out. I was
yeah,
playing
yeah.
dial up. I was playing Classic WoW on dial up, right? In 2004. So, I don't think the internet capability was going to be that strong, but 3 years later, right, Halo 3 comes out to 2007 with the launch of the Xbox 360, kind of the launch. Basically the launch. I think it came out 2 or 3 months afterwards or something like that. Like it came out that holiday year. Um and that was when it was huge. You really, I feel like there were a lot of time. I played a lot of Halo 3. Just like multiplayer, like in high
No,
school,
I
and early
agree.
college.
I definitely agree. Like Halo 3, like I remember the Halo 3 launch as an event, right? Like I remember playing.
Mhm.
It must have been Halo 3. It was like we land, like we went to a friend's house and we land our 4 Xboxes together and like had different TVs in different rooms and different teams and just like screamed at each other for a whole night, right? Like that was a great time. So, but like Halo 2, I think like Halo 3 um was a bit more polished and like I know a lot of people fell off because things like what BXR is.
No.
Okay, so this is like the fastest way to kill in Halo 2 was battle rifle, shoot, X to like reload, and then you cancel the reload with the attack animation. And that like killed somebody super fast, and like that tech fell off with Halo 3. And I know a lot of people like they were like, "Look, this is like the Smash 4 versus Melee thing, or Smash
Right.
Brawl,
Okay.
or Smash Brawl versus Melee," even though it didn't have the same problems. I just, I think like I think you're generally right, but like this is maybe like a Jedi versus Empire thing, right? Like but I don't want to get too caught up on that point, but I
Okay, and then after that, there's a bunch of other games, right? Halo Reach, Halo ODST, Halo 4 and Halo 5 come out from 343, in the 2010s or whatever. The Master Chief Collection, which ironically is the other thing. I never really saw people talk about Halo 4 and Halo 3. I saw a lot of people talking about the Master Chief Collection when it came out, which was the remaster of the first 3 Halo games, and got people playing Halo 2 and Halo 3 kind of era multiplayer, right? With those same sorts of rules. And I bet that actually had a pretty big effect on Halo Infinite and kind of the design direction of Halo Infinite.
yeah, I could buy that. I could buy that. But do we have do you have anything you want to talk about specifically about our time with Infinite? Like, uh,
Oh, yeah. I mean, so I guess all that's just context, right?
yeah.
Um, when it came to Infinite itself, I think uh the thing that was appealing to me was the time to kill. I think that might be the core factor that got me into Halo in a way that like I would have otherwise found frustrating, right? In Apex or in PUBG, for instance, I've complained about that factor before, right? But then we did our episode on Spellbreak. One of the things I really liked about Spellbreak is that the time to kill was pretty long on Spellbreak. You could have these kind of longer, more drawn out sort of skirmishes. And I get that same sort of feeling in Halo. Not quite as long, but Halo Infinite has me making longer term kind of tactical decisions rather than just being like, how quickly can I shoot a burst of bullets into somebody's face, right? Which seems to define, it's Warzone,
Yeah.
Apex, basically every other FPS I can think of that I've played in like sort of the modern era. Now I do wonder how much of that is just is design. I also wonder if it's like a skill floor, skill ceiling kind of thing, right? Are people just not acclimated to the new version of the game? I've definitely had some pretty quick kills, in Halo Infinite. All things considered, right? Like, there's the shotgun. I don't know what weapon that's called, but the shotgun basically two shots, guys.
Yeah,
Which was
but
fun, right? Like,
I was just saying,
and
you
that's a
think
pretty quick
about
time to kill.
COD, right? Like a shotgun at close range will one shot somebody, right? Like,
That's true. Yeah, I
um,
guess.
and I like there are like the power weapons kill faster, right? Like I think
Yeah.
that's part of it, but like um also like the I think the general idea is that you get power in situations rather than like kind of universal power, right? Like you can't
Yeah.
like a sniper rifle will not body shot one kill someone, but you have to get a headshot for that to work. That's the closest thing you can get to like. And then like the sword and the hammer will one shot, and like you stick people with grenades, but like they all have like significant
Those are
counterplay.
all very classic Halo rules,
Yeah,
though. That
yeah,
was true in Halo 2, right?
right.
I guess the gravity hammer wasn't in Halo 2, but obviously the
Uh,
sword was, obviously sticking was.
the gravity hammer was definitely in Halo 3.
It was definitely in Halo 3. I don't know if it
I
might have
don't
been in Halo
remember.
2. I don't
Yeah,
super remember. We used to do swords and stickies
yeah,
in
yeah.
Halo 2 where it's just a map of all swords and plasma grenades. There are a lot of like fun dumb rules sets like that we used to play, like rocket launchers and scorpions, where you play Blood Gulch and there's a scorpion on either side, and all of the weapon pickups are rocket launchers.
Yeah, we used to play a variation of Juggernaut where like where the Juggernaut was just like super powered, and so like it was just like everybody had to work together to knock down the Juggernaut. That I remember having a ton of fun with. Um but like yeah, there was like all sorts of silly custom games that like really became popular. And some that became like, popular enough that they got their own like official recognizance, like the Master Chief Collection, which to be fair, launched as an absolute mess, but got better as time went on.
Yeah, that's true.
Like the soccer game. Um,
Oh,
Was
yeah, yeah, yeah.
was like is part of like is like there was a playlist for it in Master Chief Collection. So that's always super neat. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think that was one of the things that was also interesting about, we played a bunch of quick play matches. So we played a variety of different game types, right? There's one flag where, you go pick up a flag and take it back to your base. There's capture the flag, traditional, right? You run to the enemy base to pick up their flag, run it back to your base. Um, there's like a stronghold game where you have to hold points in order to score points. Kind of like it reminded me of Arathi Basin. There's a version of that where the only way to score points is to get all three at the same time. So you have to hold three locations at the exact same time. There's just regular old Slayer, right? Like it felt like there were just a lot of different game modes, and especially those objective based game modes um, are just sort of more tactically complex in a lot of ways that I think was endearing, I guess. And this is the kind of thing that I haven't seen in a long time. Obviously there are tactical objectives and there's a lot of tactical gameplay to Warzone, COD, Apex, right? But it is less sort of directed than this. You know what actually reminded me the most of is Overwatch, where it is pushing a payload or capturing a point, right? Like those kinds of things that make me rethink sort of the game in terms of a team matchup more than the kind of like exploratory sandbox nature of a battle royale.
yeah, and so that's an interesting point too because like I'm thinking like COD has those modes too, but I think because of the long time to kill, you can like put more focus on like actually holding objectives, right? Like it is possible, like in COD, like yeah, there's sometimes where it's like stop killing people and focus on the objective type thing, but like it's also a lot easier to like kind of have that not be an issue just because time to kill so short, right? Like you can deal with the people that are on the objective, right? As part of like your kill fun fest. Maybe the game drags on because no one's taking the objective, but it's about that. Whereas like if you get distracted, like engaging in a protracted firefight with someone, that's potential like eyes off the objective, right? Or like
Yeah.
it requires a little bit of coordination, right? Like right before we got on here, I played oddball with my brother and some friends, and frankly, the other team just came down as more coordinated than us, right? And we were just kind of we were kind of getting our sea legs. So it's not like I'm blaming them, but like it's just kind of like that's the kind of thing you have to do if you want to be successful in this type of game, or if you want to like optimize, which I think maybe is part of why it fell out of favor, because that makes it a lot easier to basically optimize around, right? Like to stop, right? Like this is something we talk about with like League of Legends, right? Like an organized team stomps all over a disorganized team 9 times out of 10, even if the disorganized team is marginally more skilled, or even like I think
Yep.
you think you can even be significantly more skilled and be disorganized and still lose to uh, an otherwise organized team. Um, and that
Yeah,
is
I
not great
th-
for
I do
pickup
think that
play.
that is like I would expect a team that's in voice together to beat a team that's not in voice together most of the time, right?
Yeah,
Um League does have good ways to communicate without voice, but I just compare kind of the experiences I've had in like a solo queue, right? Like it is just so much less useful to ping the missing ping than to say in voice, "Hey, I don't know where Vagar is" or whatever.
right. But to that point, right? Like the COD types of games are like more forgiving about this like kind of pick up and play type stuff, right? Um, whereas like Halo, I think relies a lot more on that kind of objective gameplay, which is
Yeah. I also think that there's a tactical sweet spot in a way that Halo is kind of capitalizing on, right? Like because time to kill is so short in COD, it sort of feels like you don't have room to cognitively think. It's almost like most of your action is based on reflex almost rather than, like real cognition, right?
right.
Or an ability to communicate with my teammates about stuff. You can get that in Warzone, I guess, right? With like longer, more protracted. Where is he? Oh, you're pointing stuff, you're
Yeah,
using cover, all that kind of stuff, right? But in any kind of like heads up sort of firefight, you almost always can't talk in those. You just kind of have to you just kind of have to go, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I feel like because in Halo you have a little bit more time to breathe between, those interactions, right? You open up that level of kind of tactical gameplay such that, like, when we were coordinating for capture the flag, for instance, that did feel like a league match to me. It felt more akin to playing a game of League than it felt like playing Warzone. And I think that comes just almost entirely out of sort of like time to kill and the kind of there's also a certain level of defensive play that unlocks, right? Where like I was making certain plays about how to move because I know that I can take a couple of pot shots from somebody. If somebody is at medium distance and they're shooting me with even a good medium range, like a battle rifle or something like that, right? Like I still have options to duck behind cover. I have options to jump. I have options to strafe and serpentine or whatever. I don't really feel like I have any of those kinds of defensive options if I'm playing something like COD, right?
Yeah.
Really the only thing that matters in COD is putting my reticule over them and pressing, right? It's almost entirely offensive gameplay. So, I don't
Yeah.
know. That's something.
No, no, no. That definitely makes sense. Yeah. And like I was saying, I wonder how this is going to shake out in kind of longer term. If like the kiddies are going to bounce off of it because it's like I can't win. I can't like hit shoot good, right? Like also like you're like part of the genre or part of this subgenre is there's no starting loadouts, right? Like you always start with the assault rifle and the pistol, at least in the kind of the standard matches. Um,
Yeah, and I
you
don't
know,
think either of those guns are very good, to be honest. I almost always started a round by running and trying to find something else. I basically never wanted to
yeah,
use.
they are competent, but like I think the design of the game is that like you don't want to stick with them generally.
Yeah.
Maybe you stick with one of them for some reason, but
Yeah, I mean, I liked using the pistol, just kind of as a taking pot shots, right? I would sometimes do that over actually. I did one of the interesting things I found myself running out of ammo actually pretty commonly. Because it is pretty punishing in terms of just your ammo reserves. If you are sort of laying down covering fire, you're just gonna run out. You have like
yeah,
2 or 3 clips in there. That's it. If I'm taking kind of long range pot shots, a lot of the times I'm just doing that with a pistol because the point is I'm not actually trying to kill the guy. I just want to sort of influence their move. I want them to know that they are under fire and make the decision to leave or engage, kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely.
I
I,
think part of that also came in the how the we were tactically playing. Something we were doing in capture the flag is I was playing goalie, right? I was standing on our flag, right? And I didn't feel like I had a good ability. Like that was where I was really making this decision, right? Someone is approaching. I want them to know that I'm here and that I'm defending the flag and I'm taking these pot shots with with the pistol. And so even if it's not incredibly threatening, I mean, maybe they could understand that I'm using the pistol or whatever, right? But just as a kind of like a deterrence method almost, right? Like
yeah,
that was kind of the philosophy. I just don't know that I even think that kind of thing would ever enter my mind in most other first person shooters.
yeah. No, I think I get what you're saying there. I think maybe like so it's interesting because I just don't think like I don't think COD favors those types of matches, right? Like I don't. There's generally not from all the COD I've played an emphasis on like capture the flag type stuff. It's mostly kind of like holding points and whatnot, which you know
Yep.
part of like capture the flag and oddball is like you can't shoot your gun, right? Like you're busy holding the thing, which I think is like kind of disfavored um in those types of games.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I think it's perfect actually, right? It's which is, you know, it's a real trade-off, right? When you have the flag, you're a man down, essentially,
yeah,
right? You can't even use the flag to like this is one of the interesting things. Like in WoW, for instance, when you hold the flag, it is also a liability, but it's also a bonus, right? The flag gives you bonus damage done and damage taken, right? So holding the flag is a risk reward thing, right? And as a flag carrier, I can legitimately outplay somebody, right? By using that damage bonus to my whatever, right? Um, but in Halo, you're not you have just zero options. You have to get an escort. You have to have a babysitter, as otherwise you're fucked.
Right. I mean, you could throw the flag away and try and kill the person, but that's like obviously like a higher skill thing, right? Like it's like I actually think that that's part of this equation too. Is like because the time to kill is higher, and because there's like these kind of like advanced maneuvers, um, skills a little bit more important.
Hmm.
I know this kind of goes counter to like the coordination thing I said earlier, but I think it's all part of the same package, right? Like, um, in a game of COD, a very good player can be killed by a very bad player by just like being in the wrong place at the wrong time. That is much
Yep.
harder to do in Halo. There's still opportunities. There's still times when it happens, but like, um, just simple things like in a assault rifle versus assault rifle fight, a lot of times it comes down to who lands more shots on the other player, right? Like, and that's a large amount of that is skill. Whereas something like COD, like you know, with like we were talking about the shotgun, you need to land one shot with the shotgun placed right, and you're good, right? And
Yeah, and a lot of the times, like, when I think about 9 out of the 10 kills I ever got in Warzone or I ever got in PUBG, they were sort of anticipatory kills, right? It is I am standing behind the door with the shotgun and I think someone is coming and they open the door and I blast them, you know? Or I am on top of a ridge with a mid-range rifle, a sniper rifle, right? And I know that there's someone in that house and I just have my reticle over the door or the window and I watch them leave and I shoot them, right? Like those are the kinds of things that determine how and where and when I'm going to get kills. And I do think that there is skill in that, right? So for instance, something that I think it was Super Bunny Hop said about Siege, Rainbow Six Siege is that he really liked that kind of gameplay, right? Because Rainbow Six Siege has, you have operators and they all have their own like unique little abilities. And most of the time, those abilities are built around this sort of anticipatory gameplay. It is putting a roving drone out so I can see where a person is. It's like you doing like some guy has like a wall, he has like a little retractable metal plate or whatever, so he can kind of hunker down wherever he wants or whatever, right? And so I think there's plenty of gameplay around there. I've obviously never played Siege. I don't know the specifics of this stuff, right? Um, but it's just a very different sort of skill set. Even if I did have that anticipation in Halo, and I did plenty of times, right? Like where I could see people were going and they weren't necessarily like, aware of me or whatever. I don't think that translated to kills as often as it did when we were playing these battle royales. And there were plenty of times where I thought I had the jump on somebody and they outplayed me and I died.
yeah, no, that's the way it goes. And so I think the kind of question that comes out of this is like, obviously, this is kind of like a return to an older genre. We've also seen kind of a return to the so-called boomer shooters, that are like they aren't popular in the multiplayer space as much, but like there's a whole company, I forget the name of them, that like their whole thing is they do like these like not so great graphics, but like Doom style boomer shooters. Like there's like Hexit, like there's like a thief kind of one, and I can figure out what they are, but I think they might be published by Devolver. Um, but there's a bunch of them, but like that's like a return to kind of like a previous era. This is kind of a return to the previous era. Are we cycling out of the COD cycle? Do you think? Uh,
Maybe. Um, what's honestly kind of interesting is I would have expected this to take place with some of these other, like Titanfall, for instance. It would make sense for me to think about something like Titanfall
right, that's fair.
as like the kind of game that is making that change. I'm trying to look up these like boomer shooter games.
New Blood Interactive is the company I'm thinking of.
Oh, okay.
And there's like Ultra Kill, Dusk, a Medieval are like the three big ones. Dusk,
Oh yeah, I know Dusk.
yeah, Dusk is the one that's like super. I think Dusk is the one that's out. I think like Ultra Kill, I think is in early access. Yeah, Ultra Kill is in
Okay,
early
yeah. Hmm.
access. A Medieval, oh, Medieval's out. I just don't. It's not as popular maybe as the other ones. Um, but like Dusk, I know has a lot of attention. Um, yeah. And I think they have another game too. Or maybe it's there's something in the same genre. Dusk. What am I thinking of? I don't know. Um, but like there's a revival there, right? Like I arguably Doom, and the what was the new Doom called that I can't remember,
Doom
but
Eternal.
yeah, Eternal are arguably boomer shooter revivals. Um,
Interesting. Do I think of those as boomer shooter revivals? I do think that there are some core tenets of Doom that show up in those games, but I almost kind of think I don't know, like there's that like melee aspect of Doom, like the way you get health and stuff is by getting
yeah,
like these melee execution kills or whatever. I almost feel like like the Doom and Doom Eternal are less revivals and more I don't know what I would call this.
evolutions.
Like homages or something like I think it is trying to evoke the same feelings you had playing Doom in 1990 but like with modern mechanics that aren't necessarily Doom mechanics. Do you know what I mean?
I do. I think that's probably more true of Doom Eternal. I think Doom 2016 was a little bit closer.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, sure.
Doom Eternal almost feels like a rhythm game in some ways, um, just because like it's based around kind of like rotating through everything. Um,
Mhm. And like chain kill combo. So there really isn't any of that in the original Doom,
yeah,
obviously.
yeah.
The original Doom almost feels like weirdly like a puzzle game by that metric, right? Where it's like because you're managing stuff like there's a certain amount of ammo on the map, there's a certain amount of health on the map, right? And you can't really uh fuck around, I guess,
Yeah,
with it.
yeah. Um, but yeah, but point being
Mhm.
is we're seeing some of these genres start to like turn over, right? And like and revive, right? Like speaking of kind of like return to middle school, AOE 4 just launched as well, which is like AOE
Yeah.
3 AOE 3 was like like the much like Halo 5 was kind of like the redheaded stepchild of the AOE family. And AOE 4 has returned to form for AOE 2. I know friend of the cast X has been enjoying AOE 4. Um, uh, everything old is new again, I guess. I don't know. Do you have thoughts about kind of like that kind of like revival aspect?
I think in a grander scheme, I think I would have said that progression almost feels like linear, right? So something I've said before, for instance, is that um I think humans just are naturally progressive in not a political sense, but in a like a scientific sense, right? It is in human nature to refine and get better at the things that we do over time. We learn them, we understand them better, we unlock new innovations in those things, we get better at making those things, right? Which is part of my philosophy that you know, like movies now are almost definitionally better than movies before just because they have technical things on the movies that came before, right? So an example of this might be something like you know, and it's kind of easier to explain, I guess maybe in like the game design space, right? Like so for instance, if I'm thinking about a game like Halo Infinite and Halo, right? Halo the original Halo is a good game, right? But we also have learned just to make higher fidelity graphics, right? And so nobody would go back and tell us that if we were to make Halo with those higher fidelity graphics, that it would be a worse game, right? Like generally speaking, you would want to take those improvements that have been made in the subsequent 20 years, bring them back, right? And this is also true of like I don't know. This is true of a lot of games, right? In World of Warcraft, you would what you we all enjoy classic WoW and everything like that, and classic WoW is its own sort of thing, right? But there are certain things in retail that people would like to see in classic, right? Like transmog or a lower cooldown on the Hearthstone, right? Like little tiny changes that have accumulated over the years that if you were to say, okay, but would classic WoW be bad if it had this? The answer is probably no, right? Um, Etc. Right? But I actually wonder if this is proof that things are a little bit more cyclical than that in a way, right? Where it is less about getting strictly better over time, right? And more about falling into and out of sort of an amorphous kind of like uh almost zeitgeist, right? Where it is like, okay, in the middle of the 2000s, we iterated on the Halo formula and eventually got to the COD formula, right? The COD formula of games became immensely popular 2008 and then kind of dominated through the next couple of years. Modern Warfare 1, Modern Warfare 2 probably have the same level of like love and clout that Halo and Halo 2 did, right? Um, but if we are now kind of returning back to that Halo and Halo 2 era of design, right? It almost sort of suggests that there is that sort of weirdly cyclical nature um to game design, right? And that maybe as things change, they become sort of like frustrating and then they grate on you and then they revert and change back, which is maybe a bigger answer to that question than you might have
No, no,
expected.
no.
But do you see what I'm getting at?
I do, and I don't know if I don't know if I agree that like iterating on Halo got us COD. I think that like COD, like, because what I see is like COD dropped and happened to hit at the right time with the right kind of mechanics. The same way that like PUBG did, right? Like
Sure.
PUBG isn't an iteration on COD. It's just kind of like a a new thing that happened to grab everybody's hearts and minds, as it were, right? Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's less of an iteration on COD. It's more of an iteration on FPSs, right? COD is an iteration on the FPS genre that supplants Halo, right? And maybe you make the argument that PUBG, Fortnite are iterations on the FPS genre that supplant COD in a way.
sure, but like they're not because like I iteration like you said, kind of iteration implies like an improvement, but I don't know if it's an improvement so much as it is just like something different that's like maybe this is part of this is just kind of like the way that companies tend to glob onto trends, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
we have had, so many CODs and CODs likes and so many battle royales for the past handful of years that Halo feels like a breath of fresh air again, right? Like you can either advance the genre by producing something totally new, right? Like, I can, if I could predict it, I'd make it and sell 30 million copies, right? But like, something totally new that takes the FPS genre by storm, or you can go back to an old breath of fresh air with a good execution on an old idea, right? Like whether that's a Doom 2016 in the single player space or a Halo Infinite in the multiplayer space. I'm kind of interested.
No, I mean, I feel like indie games this happens in indie games all the time, right? You have uh like Super Meat Boy is sort of a return to like 2D platformers like Mario or whatever, right?
Yeah, maybe, but like I don't know if the platform. I guess it's a return to 2D platformers or a 3D. Maybe,
Mhm.
maybe I
I mean,
buy that.
maybe that's incorrect. I'm not a platformer person, obviously. I just feel
Yeah,
like I'm agreeing with you.
yeah.
That's the
No, no,
point.
no. Uh, but part of the problem is like it is very hard to have a massive multiplayer hit in the indie space, right? Especially one
Yeah,
that
that's true.
requires
Sure.
like large amounts of like network resources because it's money, right? Like it's money that
Yep.
the indies don't have. You know, Valheim works by having like by being relatively small multiplayer pools and like being hosted theoretically. I think it's hosted. It's not hosted on Valheim stuff. It's hosted on
Not hosted. Yeah, it's peer to peer. I'm pretty
yeah.
sure.
Um, it's not really competitive, so that's not an issue, right? Um, like Halo has to be by somebody like Microsoft. Even PUBG, like a small company, has still had like significant resources behind it. It wasn't like a four-person studio, right? Like it was,
Yeah, I mean they had millions of dollars, right?
yeah, yeah.
Um, and even stuff where it's like Fall Guys, right, or Among Us, right? I still think that well, I don't know. I guess maybe how much do you think games like those are fads in comparison?
Um, hmm. So I think that's like a very different phenomenon in that like those are like Twitch bait, which is like like I don't think
Okay,
Among Us gets popular if it doesn't blow up on Twitch.
sure.
And encourage like it's what are essentially crossover events.
Yeah.
Um, and like they're fun in their own right, but like Twitch and or not, Among Us and Fall Guys lasted longer in the Twitch space than it did in kind of any real life space. Like, we played Among Us a handful of times, but like nowhere near as much as we've played any of the battle royale games, right? Like,
Yeah, that's true. That's
um,
true.
and like not that Fall Guys isn't a fun game, but like you run out of steam pretty quickly with it. And so I think they tend to fall into that category. I think there's also like maybe a case for um like Twitch games, like Twitch bait games also being something along the lines of kind of like party games in an era that just doesn't have a lot of like you're essentially vicariously partying through the Twitch streamer, whereas like you could play those in like a party setting, right? Like something like a Jackbox game or a Mario Party game. Um, but those also like those aren't like long run time investment games, if that makes sense. Like a league or a you know like people like I'm sure people will play Halo competitively. It's got a ranked button that I haven't touched yet. God forbid, right? Like,
But I'm sure they have some kinds of rewards to fight for in the same way that like WoW has ahead of the curve or
yeah,
League has, like victorious skins, right? Like there are reasons to do to like to climb the ranks and do the ladders, right? Which by the way is part of what animates this like FOMO stuff we were talking about. And what I find is interesting about those battle passes, right? Um somebody on the WoW subreddit today posted that the thing that made him unsubscribe from the game was FOMO rewards, right? Which is stuff like KSM, right? So you get Keystone Master, completed 15 of every dungeon, and you get the mount, right? And I that was a very weird thing to me because on my perspective on that, KSM isn't like I guess I understand the function of its FOMO, but that is a side effect of providing a reward for a player like me, right? Someone who is achieving inside of any given Mythic Plus season, right? If I put the time in to learn the dungeons, to learn the affix, to gear my character or whatever, I want a reward for that stuff. That reward is the Keystone Master mount, right? And that mount would not feel like a reward if it got given away to everybody who completes a +2,
yeah.
for instance,
I mean,
or something like that, right?
there's a level of FOMO to that, but like it's justified in a way. Like it's a sliding scale, right? Like it's like
Yeah.
how much FOMO is acceptable, right? Like um we've had like seasonal PvP gear in WoW for a long time, right? Like
Yeah, and we've had seasonal mounts for much of the seasonal mounts started in the Burning Crusade, the very first WoW expansion, right? Had gladiator mounts, right? For like the top end of players. And that's really what, I like when I think of KSM. KSM is a gladiator mount reward. Though I think it's probably a little bit less than gladiator level. There's also the seasonal PvP mount that is that's just like it's like win 100 arenas or something and you get a mount for that at a certain level. You have to get you get to like arena rating 1400. You win 100 matches at 1400, you get a mount from that. That's like the like the Alliance War Hippo or whatever the fuck that mount is, right? But that amount isn't quite FOMO because you can still buy it later, right? Because every time what happens is when you get that 100, you get a token and you can buy any of the mounts. And that includes all of the old ones too. But if I get Gladiator in season 1 of Shadowlands, right? If I get the sinful Gladiator for season 1 of Shadowlands, um that mount that I only get that for getting to whatever gladiator rating is, like 2.1k or something like that. Inside of that season individually, right? There's just no other way to get that mount. And I kind of think that's also sort of fair because like the challenge is also
oh
sort
yeah.
of locked. Like so for instance in um season 1 of Shadowlands Mythic Plus has the prideful affix, right? I can't I can't go play the prideful affix anymore. That's just like an impossibility, right? There's no way for me to go, even if I did get KSM in season 2, there's just like no way for me to re-simulate sort of the challenge of that. Um and so it kind of just it feels like that wouldn't really make sense. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. And I think part of the problem here is like people want to be like all FOMO's bad. And it's not, right? Like you have to have like sometimes it makes things compelling, right? Like, ahead of the
Yeah.
curve is compelling because, like like the games can't stay the same forever, right? Otherwise you run out of things to do. And it's like a reward for like doing content at speed essentially, right? Like at the difficulty level it was intended to be. Um
Yeah, and I think in a weird way, the battle pass system that you describe actually kind of does satiate that, right? Because I guess I don't know, is there anything more complex to the sort of gameplay of the season by season of Halo Infinite?
Um, I don't. I mean, there might be patches, but like that shouldn't. It doesn't affect it in the same way that like, you know, ahead of the curve was. See, this is
Yeah.
what battle
Ahead of the
pass.
Curve is a completely new boss, right?
Yeah,
And I would maybe understand it if in Halo Infinite each of the seasons, like let's say there was a seasonal modifier, right? There's only certain maps in the pool, there's only certain guns, right? At the end of the season, all that stuff goes away. There's new guns, new maps, for instance, right? Maybe then I would understand or I would think it's radical that you can farm an old battle pass on new content, right? Um, but I just sort of don't think that it's a really one-to-one comparison because at the end of the day, what is the difference between season 1 and season 3 of the Halo Infinite Battle Pass? Probably not that much, all things considered. There's maybe some new stuff added into the pool, and I'm sure there's a meta and all this other sort of stuff, right? Like they'll rebalance the guns or whatever. But I don't get the sense that it's going to be something like fundamentally new or different. Is that right?
yeah. That is my understanding. And I think part of
Okay,
it is that like the battle pass rewards as a kind of rule are fundamentally divorced from the actual gameplay, right?
sure.
Like it's like kind of like you grind in certain ways to like get a number to go up, and then you will achieve the reward, and you can substitute whatever you wanted for those number ups, right? Like, whereas KSM and ahead of the curve are like accomplishing specific tasks, right? That are like
Yeah.
that are particular, right? Like if KSM was like, you know, clear X number of like, Keystone Master is clear every dungeon over this, right? Like it was just like, you know, you get like a point for every dungeon you clear over some level, right? Like then maybe it drifts more into that FOMO territory, right? Like if you could clear Theater of Pain at 16 like 30 times and get KSM, maybe it starts to drift into that FOMO territory. Um,
I it's even more complex than that because of I remember thinking yesterday when we were leveling up at the end of every map, right? It would show you your like little quest progress, your challenge progress. It's like, oh, there was one thing where I killed somebody. It's not called a backstab, but it's what is essentially the backstab. You hit somebody in the back of the head with a melee auto kill in Halo, right? And there's a challenge to do that 5 times or whatever. I got like 2 of them or something in a map. And then that rewards experience, and then that experience goes into your battle pass or whatever, right? And that process sort of creates this kind of fungibility of all of these different tasks, right? So it's kind of like in a world where I could get KSM by killing bosses in particular ways or like in particular orders or with particular whatever, right? And there's a million different of these things, right? And that all funnels into this one number in Halo Infinite that's experience, obviously. Um, that kind of obfuscates the whole process that it becomes this sort of soup of just do the content and the rewards pop up as a little bonus, right? Whereas when it comes to KSM, I'm very particular, right? So for instance, the things that we're hunting right now are all of the plus 20 keys, and we have 7 out of the 8 dungeons, right? We've cleared everything except for Mists of Tear to Sight at a plus 20. And it's just because we haven't had a lot of rolls on a plus 20 key. Like we did 2 dungeons last night back to back just to re-roll all of our keys so that we could see if we could roll a plus 20 mists and try that key. That's like a very particularized and directed kind of like goal oriented, task oriented, dungeon
yeah,
hunting kind of thing. And I bet that would happen in very high levels of Halo Infinite, right? Like if I was grinding out 50 hours of Halo Infinite, I might be checking my challenges and kind of orienting my gameplay around that a little bit more. But in general, I sort of get the feeling that Halo Infinite is just kind of haphazardly rewarding you for random bullshit. You know what I mean? Like at the end of every match, you just kind of get number go up. Right?
yeah. So
Whereas, KSM, AOTC, Gladiator, all of these are like very particularized. I have to meet a certain incredibly clear objective, and my focus is that objective.
Yeah,
Right.
I think part of that is just that like I think Halo Infinite's bad at servicing challenges, like as like a matter of interface design. Because like the analog, like I've played a fair amount of Apex Legends, and they're very clear about like what your challenges are, and that does influence your gameplay, I think.
That's true.
But
I mean, that was also true of COD when we were playing
yeah,
Warzone, because Warzone also has very clear challenges with like contracts or whatever, and we were making our decisions about that. Where it's like, oh, we should go do this contract for the mission, whatever it
yeah,
was.
yeah, and I don't think that invalidates the point, right? Because I think like I think the best analog might be like dailies back in like Pandaria, right? Where it's like you have to kind of like do these 5 things a day, and you'll get like X amount of rep, and that like rep break points, you'll be able to like get the bout or whatever.
Yeah, that's fair.
Excuse me. Um, and I think honestly I think part of that being a pain in the ass and a grind, not particularly fun, is why they moved away from that model in the later expansions, right? And like
Yeah.
I think that's part of the pain point of battle passes, right? Is like, oh, I have to go do all of these things, all of these weeklies, um, even in ways that like maybe I don't particularly like to play, in order to like unlock this battle pass, and I only have a certain amount of time to do it in. Right, like
That
that.
yeah, I mean, that feeling is FOMO, right?
Yeah,
It is the feeling of it's almost sort of an opportunity cost, right? But I'm getting this with Hearthstone, right? So I've been playing Hearthstone. Hearthstone has a battle pass now, and what that the use it's actually very similar to the old function where every day you get a new quest. Your quest gives you a thing, right? It used to just give you raw gold. It would give you 60 gold, 80 gold, whatever, right? Now it gives you an amount of experience. It'll give you 1200, 1500, 1800 experience points or whatever. That experience funnels into the battle pass, and every time you level up in the battle pass, you get 50 gold, right? That kind of a thing. And there's that real feeling of, oh my God, it's the end of the week, and I have 3 weekly quests, all of which give 3000 experience, which is like a pack each, right? You know, and I have to clear these out, or else I will miss out on the oncoming weeks worth of weekly rewards, right? Because if I have a weekly reward or I have a weekly quest in my quest log, I won't get that refresh. I won't get that reroll, and I will be down the opportunity cost of 3000 experience because of it. That's interesting. That's something that has been written out of WoW to a certain extent with 9.1.5, right? They got rid of the Torghast cap, they got rid of the Valor cap, right? And just, hey, if you want to do this thing, just farm away, man. Like go fucking bananas.
yeah. I mean, and I don't think like part of the thing with Torghast and whatnot is you had more than enough time to get like the mats you needed for like 1 or 2 or probably even more legendaries,
Mhm.
right? And like like if you're collecting them, sure, but like realistically, you're not going to need more than 1 or 2 of them, at least at this point. Um, uh, and I think that kind of avoids the problem too. It's interesting you bring up the Hearthstone thing. It's like that basically was me the last time I played Arena Magic Arena. Like I would get up, like I was getting up and like playing like 3 or 4 matches of Magic to like max out my daily, and then I was like, oh, well, I need to stop doing this, right? Um, and I think and that's the interesting thing about the Halo Infinite Battle Pass, right? Is like if you like, you pop in and your dailies are like, get 4 kills with the plasma rifle. You're like, I fucking hate the plasma rifle, right? You can like not do that and not worry about not being able to finish your battle pass on time, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe it means you won't be able to like immediately run down your season 2 battle pass, but um yeah,
Yeah, I guess that's one of the nice things about, like WoW and Hearthstone, I guess both sort of dodge that because you know, in WoW, the battle pass is essentially renown, sort of,
right.
right? And in Hearthstone, the battle pass is the battle pass, but I completed the Hearthstone battle pass like a month after the expansion came out, and I've just been in like the max ranks or whatever. Um, and I didn't grind out that much Hearthstone. There was one period where I was grinding to get back to platinum because when I was playing Hearthstone before I got to plat and I started again and I was bronze, right? Because if you're off the game for a certain amount of time that you lose all your MMR basically. Um but otherwise, and in that even I think was after I completed the battle pass because it was after the patches. So I guess it's just a matter of like, can you give players enough time that they won't feel, like behind. Like I'm sure if somebody were to buy the United in Stormwind battle pass right now, it would be incredibly hard for them to complete it. Uh, but I think if they bought it a month ago, it's probably done by now, right?
Yeah.
If they've been playing on a semi regular basis, right?
Yeah, I think that's like the key to like avoiding these FOMO problems is like making it um not so obscene that like you feel like you have to be playing all the time in order to catch up.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
that's the reason, right? Like, that's the reason this stuff is limited. I had a post of mine on the WoW subreddit go to the front page because I just pointed that out to people, right? Like there was a while where time gating was this thing where people were like, WoW is so bad because it's time gated. There's all this time gating, right? And I was like, time gating is kind of what we asked for because time gating is the opposite of the endless grind in BFA and Legion, right? Because the artifact power was explicitly not time gated. You could just sit there and farm islands all fucking day if you want. And people said this was terrible. And I actually liked that, right? Like I was the person that was against that change, and I still sort of am against that change, right? Um, but that's the reason why Torghast was capped. Was so that you didn't feel like you had to sit there and spam Torghast for 5 hours on patch day to level your legendary to max immediately, right? The cap is there to sort of meter out and sort of say, hey man, sometime this week, find a time, do both wings of Torghast. That's it. Like
yeah, no, I feel like there's like some weirdness there in particular, just because like Torghast feels like it needs to cap less. I think like it's probably a good thing overall that like you don't feel like you said you have to spam Torghast 5 times, but like there's only so powerful your what's it called your legendary gets, right? It gets like hits like that the max eye level, and then that. Whereas like the back in Legion, which is the last time I played significantly, like you had traits to just keep dumping your fucking anima reserves into, or what's whatever the fuck it was called, artifact power, yeah, into, and so like you could just infinitely spam it, right? Like but yeah.
And that was I mean, one of the craziest things about early Legion was the capstone trait just increased it was a flat damage modifier of 1%, right? Increased all your damage by 1% per level, and it scaled infinitely. I actually don't know. It might have had a cap, but it went up a bunch, right? And that was too much power, right? That was too much. People were like, "What? 1% power? Oh my god! I have to farm, like mob souls 600 times in order to max this thing out, right?" Um, which is interesting. I think that's something about the psychology of a WoW player that I have a very hard time understanding. Like so, for instance, people complain about having to do the Korthia grind, right? And how it's you have to grind out the archivist's codex, right? Because you have to get 252. It's the only way. It's the only way to get 252 conduits, right? And it's one of two ways to get gem slots on all of your gear. Um, but just to prove a point in another post of mine on Reddit that this one did not go to the front page. This one got downvoted to oblivion. I did all the math. I simmed my character a couple of times, just manually changing the eye levels to show the difference. And I demonstrated that the amount of power I was getting from my Korthia upgrades equated to 0.6% of my overall DPS. It was like 212 DPS or something, right? Came from getting my eye level 226 conduits to eye level 252, right? Um, but like, you know, I don't know that the number matters, right? At a certain point, just the idea that people aren't optimized is a real point of huge frustration for WoW players. And that's tough. That's a
Yeah,
tough one to deal with.
yeah. I mean, like, I don't know. That's what you're playing for, I guess. I don't know. I don't even think the court grind's that bad, right? Like it's like half an hour to like do the dailies for Korthia, um, and you're there,
Yeah, I
right?
mean, my thing, I mean, I like grinds like the Korthia grind because I like having a reason to play. I just want to play the game, dude. You know what I mean? I like World of Warcraft. I want World of Warcraft to give me good reasons to fucking play it, right? And part of that is saying, oh, hey, if you do this, if you come in, do your fucking Korthia dailies every day, there's power for that. There's a reason for you to do that, right? And in a world where that doesn't exist, I just don't have a reason to do things, and that sucks and is unfun.
Yep. Yeah. Fair enough.
But I guess I don't know. That's different than Halo Infinite. I wonder if like a hardcore Halo person would have an interaction with that, like with the Battle Pass, though, right? Like where they are, like they no longer feel compelled, or they do alternatively like really kind of like feel compelled to do this thing for whatever reason. Um,
Yeah,
and
I
that's
imagine
like frustrating.
I imagine it won't be just because like Battle Pass rewards are neat, but like everything still looks very Halo. It's not like you're getting Aquaman as a skin, right? You're getting like a slightly different piece of Mjolnir armor, right? Like, and like you're getting
Yeah,
like
that's true.
color schemes. That like I think the bigger criticism of the Battle Pass is going to come from like the opposite direction, which is like I used to be able to do most of this for free in the old Halos, and now I have to like go get a color palette instead of being able to just manually set my colors. Um,
Yeah, that's true.
um,
I also think that you could get the criticism of it's just not interesting. It doesn't
yeah,
provide me with anything cool or fun. There's no reason for me to,
yeah.
you know.
I mean, but I think part of it is that like you're playing Halo to play Halo, right? Like you're not playing Halo to, um, uh, you're not playing Halo necessarily for the Battle Pass, right? Like,
I mean, you say that, but I actually do think that it is becoming more and more of an animating factor for players playing. Like something I described the fundamental game design engine behind WoW, for instance, is do content, get rewards, right?
right,
You do content, you do Mythic Plus, you do raids, you do PvP, whatever you get gear out of that, right? These are rewards. You get mounts, you get whatever, right? And those two things, when those two things are working in tandem, that is when the game is fun, right? I want to be doing Mythic Plus because Mythic Plus is fun, but I also want it to give me powerful rewards, powerful gear.
sure,
And I think that the prevalence of battle passes, right, like that kind of behavior in games is more and more common, right? Like the do content get rewards goes back as far as WoW does, right? Like that's part of
yeah, I mean, it goes. I
2004
think it goes.
WoW.
I think it goes back further than that, even, right? Like,
Sure, yeah,
like
sure.
so.
I just think that like 2004 Halo 2 doesn't have to do
You
content
kind of
get rewards.
it
That's not
doesn't.
part of
Yeah, yeah.
the loop, right? But I think it probably is part of the loop for people playing FPSs in 2021.
So I think it definitely is, but I don't think it necessarily needs to be. If that makes sense, right? Like I think like game like it's definitely an enticement, but like so I think this goes back to kind of like this is a COD era, right? Like every game started getting RPG elements, right? Where you could level like different parts of your gear up to kind of like incentivize you to keep playing.
Mhm.
Um, and the thing about a battle pass is essentially that treadmill, but without having like the weirdness of, well, I've maxed out my gun and there's nothing more to get on it. So maybe I'll switch to a different gun and like, trade out power for like the dopamine hit of leveling something up, right? Like,
Yeah. Power
um,
for like that progression feel, right? Yeah.
yeah, because the battle passes are like all cosmetics, right? Like,
Mhm.
um, and and there's some like little things inside, but for the most part, it's basically cosmetics. It's just like the way things feel, um, the way things look, and it's a way to essentially get that RPG progression, but like for something that's infinitely repeatable and like meaningless gameplay wise, for the most part. And so I think you're right, but like my point is simply that Halo goes back to that era where that wasn't a thing, and so I don't know if you need the battle pass to make Halo attractive, essentially, right? Like the same way that like League, right? Like you can just fight on rank, right? As like a thing, you know, do content get reward, but reward is like competitive standing.
You say that though, but League has introduced hextech chests and those keys and skin shards, right? Like when we
Sure.
first started playing League, the reward I guess was runes and champions, right? You were getting IP spending that shit on runes and champions or whatever. But like now, right? Like you're getting chests, you're unlocking those chests. Those chests have these things. The skins are in there. I think there are more rewards to unlock by
So
playing League in 2021 than in 2010.
so I definitely agree it's there. I definitely think that's part of their strategy to get people to play more, right? Like, but I also think that like the the overriding factor for League is still probably like your rank, right? Like
Mhm.
versus or like intrinsic fun of the game, right? Like you're playing the game to have fun, right? Like that
Yeah.
is like the base of every game. That's like all there was in Halo, like Halo 2, right? Like you're playing the game because you like playing the game, right? And we added these numbers because everything needs like a treadmill to run up. But like I think the more fundamentally fun your game is, the less you need to like rely on those things. Um uh and like frankly, like for me, ahead of the curve would be fun, or like I want to get ahead of the curve in WoW, but like a lot of what I'm playing against is my own DPS number, right? Like my own parse number, right? Because like that's like
Yeah.
me like performing, right? And like that's something that's interesting to me. And part of that too, obviously, is that like I can't control what the other 14 people on the raid are doing, so I can only measure myself. Um, but I think I. I don't think you're wrong. I just think that Halo has kind of those old school kind of play the game to have fun legs um, that um, that I think can hold it. Not that I don't think that like Fortnite isn't fun, but like something about the battle royale games is there's a lot of randomness to them, and so like there's an inherent amount of unfairness to them, right? And like I think the battle pass helps mitigate some of that. Whereas a game that is more focused on being competitive and fair tends in the other direction, right? Like League has battle passes, but and I've screwed around with them sometimes, but I don't necessarily think that they're like the animating force behind a lot of things. Also, just because League games are too long for that to be practical, right? Like you can maybe get like one extra League game in, and like League does a pretty good job of the like the steps on the pass being less kind of like being less controlling of how you play and more of kind of just like things you can get while you play, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a big thing. I mean, that was one of the things I thought was crazy coming back to Hearthstone because they added achievements to Hearthstone. And I thought achievements for a long time, like I think achievements are very scary in a PvP scenario, right? Because if you implement an achievement that is a like a weird thing that wouldn't normally kind of happen, you're creating an incentive for people like not to kind of play their best or whatever, right?
Right.
And so like the danger in League, I mean, in League they kind of have achievements now. I guess they have Eternals or whatever. I don't know. I think that whole system is like dumb. It's like knock people up with Yasuo's fucking tornado or whatever, right? Um, but in a world where but the thing that was crazy about Hearthstone is Hearthstone has a lot of achievements that are crazy, right? Like one of the achievements is to like um get the kill on somebody with like in the most recent set they have Elwyn boars, and if 7 Elwyn boars die over the course of your game, you get the Sword of a Thousand Truths from the South Park World of Warcraft episode, right? And the Sword of a Thousand Truths is like a 15 damage, weapon, right? Like it's basically game over. But one of the achievements is to kill somebody with the Sword of a Thousand Truths, to attack someone's face, they die from the Sword of a Thousand Truths or whatever. And it incentivizes people to play weird ass decks. That deck's not good. That deck is awful, right? But now all of a sudden there's a reason to do it. There's a reason to play it, right? And I think that that's actually kind of interesting. In Hearthstone, there's no downside to that because
It's
you're not
one-on-one.
fucking over anyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one on one. There's no teammate that you're screwing over because you're hunting for Elwyn boars or whatever when they're trying to like win, right? But I don't know. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a whole thing.
Lou says Eternals are just weird. It's all peacocking at least, so they're there for the feel goods, and I think that's like fine, right? Like, if you're not causing your your team to lose because you're doing a bunch of bullshit, right? This is something I didn't like about like the Apex battle pass. It's like get like 2 kills with like a pistol or whatever. It's like, well, pistols are not necessarily the best weapons to be carrying around, right? Like,
Yeah,
um,
I think the ideal scenario is it is not incentivizing you to do a weird thing, but rewarding you for doing something more or less in the middle of that you would normally do anyway, right? Like so, for
yeah,
instance, the Yasuo Eternals are knock 2 people up with the ultimate, right? So it's like you try and hit your ultimate on more than one person. Fair enough. It's like block projectiles with wind wall. Well, that's the whole point of wind wall is for me blocking fucking projectiles. So sure, that's fine. And I don't remember. There's a third one, but it's just like that kind of stuff, right? I am doing those things as a matter of course when I am playing Yasuo. So I don't feel any particular need to be making different gameplay decisions in order to meet those like Eternals requests, if that makes sense.
yeah. I mean, it's also weird because like like in COD they were like like get X number of kills with this like with like shotguns or whatever. It's like maybe I'm not the best with shotguns, but it's also like low stakes in a COD deathmatch game, right? Just like it's kind of
Mm,
like low stakes in a Halo Infinite Halo Infinite like quick playlist, right? Like
Yeah.
yeah, you might not win, but like that's also like not the end of the world, right? Like, um, I do think that like Halo could cause problems because like get 3 kills with a battle rifle. It's like, well, I need to go find a battle rifle then, and maybe I'm taking the battle rifle when it's not what I should be taking because I want to get the battle pass thing. But like so far that hasn't been a problem. And I think like I said in quick play, it's not the end of the world. It's just like I don't think it's great design, but I don't think it's got a problem. This reminds me a lot of like the stuff we were talking about with New World, where like there are some like base problems with some of the design decisions in that game, but like they are not a real issue because there just isn't a ton of people playing. um,
Yeah.
um, which is an interesting solution to that problem, I guess, is like rely on it not being a problem because it's not popular enough. Yeah. Um, yeah, we've gone over on our topic time. But how was your week?
I played League and it fucking sucked. It was the
Oh,
worst decision I ever made.
have you been watching the show? Is that why you went back to it?
No, it was honestly so it was Saturday night and what happened? Oh, right. So it was Saturday night and I was raiding. So I was raiding on Saturday. We did a normal raid. It was fun. I went in there on my alt and we just we actually one shot basically everything. I think we died once on like Kelta. Oh, we died on Fate Scribe and we died on Kel'Thuzad. But otherwise it was a one shot through the entirety of like normal Sanctum on alts, which was actually pretty fun, right? Um just experiencing the boss fights from a different mechanical point of view is a lot of fun. And then I got a ping. So after the raid ended, I got a ping from my friend Dave on my Mythics team. He's like, "Hey, well, we're not pushing Mythics tonight because our tank is out, but like we want to do some gaming." So I went into their server and they were playing TFT. And I was like, "Oh, this is a perfect thing to do on Saturday night." Charles, friend of the cast, Charles Powell, had asked me, he was like, "Hey, I'm playing League again. So if you ever want to play League, hit me up." And I was like, "Okay." And I sent him a message. I was like, "Okay, tonight, now or never, right?" It's me, 3 other guys. We're in the League client and we're thinking about playing League. And then we did, and we lost all 5 games, and it fucking just sucked. And I had zero fun, and I was like, why did I fucking do this? And then we played one ARAM and won that, and I was like, good, I want to uninstall and never touch this dumbass game again. Oh,
Man, we spent so much time playing that game,
I know, I
and
know, I know.
every once in a while, I'm like, maybe I should check it out again. Like we're supposed to get news on the fighting game this month, um, and that's like interesting to me, but obviously not to. It's like and like I said, the TV show is coming out weekly. It's like should I go back and check this out?
I hear the TV show is good. I am mad. I despise League lore. I have just I don't know. I do not like League of Legends lore,
Fair enough.
which
Fair enough.
sucks. I'm friends with people who wrote that lore, right? But I just think that League of Legends lore was I don't know, it was very frustrating and bad. It made me feel bad for paying attention to it and caring about it, and I just kind of got so frustrated that I am assured now that my big thing for a long time is that it never moved forward, right? It never changed, right? When I play Yasuo, he is an interesting character with a cool personality and backstory, but he doesn't go anywhere from there, right? The thing that makes me interested in characters is their change over time. I want to see what my favorite characters are doing next, right? I want to see the new thing that is happening, right? And that just never took place. um Outside of the Gangplank, there was that one time Gangplank died and got reworked, and that was a small bit of story where his story got pushed ahead a little bit or whatever. And that just forever made me salty about League of Legends lore, so that I'm kind of uninterested in the show.
I feel like you would hate fighting games. Um, like
Yeah,
like
fighting game. I have always had a good time with fighting games, at least on a story perspective. I'm trying to think Dragon Ball Z Budokai, Dead or Alive, right? Soul Calibur. All of
right.
those fighting games have lore and story to them because it is about. I mean, like Dead or Alive is like the dumbest example of this, but it is just the like there is a tournament, win the tournament, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I absolutely. Absolutely. Um, my headset is dying, so I need to plug it in. My apologies.
That is okay.
Um, oh, I'm sorry. I have a cable here, but yes. I got this new headset, and I don't know where I put the cable. I got this new wireless headset
Oh my god,
because
I can tell. It's actually an Arctis Pro 7, right?
yes, it
Or
is. The,
it might not be Pro. Is it Pro?
um, I don't know if it's Pro or not. It's the Xbox edition because it was slightly cheaper.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. So the Arctis Pro, the cool thing about that, just to I can show the stream. You guys at home aren't going to see this. They actually give you a second battery and a little battery port. So this is an Arctis Pro 7. I actually never plugged this thing in. I just swap the battery, one for one
Uh,
basically whenever it runs out. And that's like the dumbest feature, but I fucking love it.
yeah, this is the.
Also, Lou in the chat says Story League is very event based and it fills out backstory more than future change. Yeah, exactly. This is my frustration, right? And ultimately why I am deeply invested in something like WoW lore, right? Because WoW lore is constantly moving forward, even if it's not moving forward in a way that I like love or whatever, or the story is bad or whatever. At least I get to tune in and see what my favorite characters like Varian Wryn or Anduin Wryn or Tyrande Whisperwind or Sylvanas Windrunner. Well, like what are who are my favorite characters and what are they up to? Every WoW expansion tells me, right? Every WoW patch pushes that story like forward. And that's the thing that I feel like is missing when it comes to League. Or
Hey,
it's listed it's missing. That's just the thing that frustrated me is that never happened.
yeah. So what's his name? Bane Bloodhoof up to?
Yeah, well, yeah, what is Bane Blood? I mean, Bane Bloodhoof is one of my favorite characters, and he is also just sitting in fucking like Ouroboros or whatever.
That's my
Yeah,
point,
I mean,
right?
yeah,
You go years
that
without any.
definitely is frustrating to a certain extent, especially because like one thing that I think is a little bit tough about WoW's story is that it kind of always has to introduce more stuff than it can ever carry forward, right? So like if you think about like going back, right? Every expansion has to launch with a blast of new characters and new story to play through because that's the point of an expansion, right? And you're leveling through that or whatever, and you're doing all this shit, you're doing all this cool stuff. Um, but that always is going to leave people in the dust because you just can't carry forward every single character from every expansion to every future expansion. You just can't like carry that bloat, right? So even though Talanji is a character that got a lot of screen time in Battle for Azeroth and like is someone that I'm connected to from my time playing BFA, she doesn't show up in Shadowlands or do anything in Shadowlands, right? So
Yeah, I don't even know who that is.
that's a thing.
Yeah. It's just like kind of like the dangers of like a living world, right?
Yeah.
Like what's happening in Destiny at any point in time is like cabin to like usually like a handful of characters.
Yeah. It's also frustrating because like, like I have a lot of frustrations with how the WoW story is just fundamentally told because you learn almost everything on the fucking PTR where like half of the quest text is like data mined or whatever, right? And then there's these encrypted cinematics and the cinematics are, like the only that's the only thing that they hold on to until they go live, right? So like that, I think that interaction is just like very tough. The best way to experience WoW story is not paying any attention to the fucking PTR and to just wait for it all to come out. But if you want to engage in the wider WoW community to any extent at all, you are constantly going to be flooded with spoilers from like WoW head data mining articles.
What are you gonna do?
What are you gonna do? That's a good question. What are you gonna do? The only other thing I've been doing is playing Cyberpunk, which obviously is probably something we're gonna end up talking about in its own episode.
Yeah, yeah.
So I guess I don't have to hit on that too much. You know, Hearthstone, dumb shit. I'm shocked you have no interest in learning why Jinx is crazy, B. Yeah, I don't know. It's just it's like scarred over at this point, right? Like I got so frustrated and so fed up with League of Legends lore that I just kind of cut ties with it. So even though Jinx is a character that I did like, right? I just I like don't want to learn more. I don't want to do more.
Pretty sure it's because she like was dropped into a vat of clown acid, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Ugh.
yeah. On my end, I've mostly been playing Cyberpunk as well. And Halo. Is there anything else? I played some Pathfinder over the weekend, which was nice. Um, Pathfinder 2e is fun. Highly recommend. Um, I don't know. I've been watching. I watched the whole first season of 30 Rock, which is not a show that I had watched
You've
before.
never seen 30 Rock?
30 Rock was like this show that like I kind of reserved for like I will watch episodes on planes because they always have a couple, and it's good to not know them because it's a thing that will delight me on a plane, and I don't care enough about it to watch the whole thing.
Okay.
So, but then I decided to watch the whole first season. I might watch more. Yeah, it's a fun show. Gets a thumbs up from me. Very interesting because season one's like 2007, I think.
Mhm.
There's an episode where like, um, Jenna, is that the character's name? Like the actress.
Yeah.
Like this is how like weird this is to me. Like I did not realize that they were like running a show until I like watched the pilot. Like I just like didn't understand what the premise of the show is about. I was just like, oh, there's Liz Lemon, and then there's Jack Donaghy, and they have you know hijinks. And I didn't really understand or care about like the greater context. Um, but there's a show where Jenna gets in trouble because like she says she like she's in Maxim's like sexiest like comedians or whatever, and like she accidentally like like she is misquoted as saying like she hates the troops, and like so she has to go like do this apology tour, but like part of it is that she like goes on Hardball with on MSNBC with Tucker Carlson because that's where he was at the time, and like just seeing Tucker Carlson and like what did she say? She's like, "You were very angry for someone who was so handsome," and he's like, "Wow," it's like a weird like just kind of like point out of time considering where we are like 14 years from there. Um, it's a fun show. Uh,
Yeah, it is a good show. It is part of the it's very much in that class of The Office, Parks and Rec,
like
Community, right? Early
yeah,
2000s. I mean, it starts in 2007, I guess, but it obviously runs till 2013, 2014-ish.
yeah.
Um, and it's very much in that zone of shows for me because it has that heightened reality. That's one of the things I appreciate about it. It has that heightened reality that is just like naturally more kind of comedic, right?
Yeah.
Because it is close to the real world, but it doesn't actually, like Seinfeld is something that is very close to the real world, right? It's very versilimit ver
Uh,
what am I
it,
trying to say?
it kind of like it leans.
Verisimilitudinous or whatever. There's an
Yeah,
S
I
in
see
there
what you're
somewhere.
saying, but it's like
Yeah.
more than 30 Rock, but still not like all the way there,
Yeah,
right?
but like Parks and Rec, uh the 30 Rock, Community, right? Like these are shows, these are sitcoms that are like a little bit out there of reality. Um Liz Lemon plays
It's
Halo.
kind
Is
of
that a fact? Is that like a reference to a 30 Rock episode
no.
that I
I
don't
think this
remember?
is just Akshay being.
Okay. I do remember there is an episode of 30 Rock where they it's like the last day of the year and they have like a Halo 3 thing where all of the writers play a
Tracy
gigantic.
Jordan plays a lot of Halo. Like that's like a thing. That's like a recurring element in the show is he plays Halo. There's like
Oh,
a
okay.
there's like an episode in the first season where Kenneth joins his squad or his crew, and like he beats
Oh,
him
it beats him in
in
Halo.
Halo
Okay, yeah, I remember this. Yeah,
because
and then
like
Risen.com are like, "No, you can't. You gotta
yeah
let him win."
yeah. Yeah, and then this is actually a great moment. Like .com beats Kenneth, and Tracy Marks is like, "You beat Kenneth, but Kenneth beat me. That means by the transitive property, you should beat me."
I actually really do enjoy Tracy Jordan in that show.
Yeah,
Or
I'm
Tracy Morgan? No,
Tracy
wait, which
Jordan.
one is his real name?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know anything about this. Maybe I'm wrong. Um,
If it's Tracy Jordan in the show, it's Tracy Morgan in real life. It is his actual name for sure.
Played by Tracy Morgan. Wow.
Okay, yeah.
For a long time, I thought they just had the same name. I mean, that is a very kind of like That's interesting because that's kind of like you know like all of like those shows in like the what is it, like the 50s or the 60s, like the Mary Tyler Moore show,
Mm.
or the Andy Griffith show. Like the characters all had the same first name, but like we're technically not
That's true. I mean,
scientific.
I just watched season 5 of Big Mouth, which is the Nick Kroll, John Mulroney show, and the main character is Nick Birch. Uh, so very autobiographical, I guess, by that point. I mean,
Yeah.
that show, I also I love Big Mouth, also very like heightened comedy or whatever. Um, but the end of the 5th season, does anybody care about these? There's no spoilers in Big Mouth, right? At the end of the 5th season of Big Mouth, the most recent season of Big Mouth, Nick Birch storms the animation offices of Nick Kroll and has a conversation with live action Nick Kroll about like the teenage, pubescent emotions he's feeling.
All right then. Well, um, we're at time and we've got to go raid in 15
That's
minutes.
true. We
So
do have to go raid in 15 minutes. We gotta go kill Sylvanas.
yeah. Um, maybe Kelth is on too. So I'm gonna end it there. I'm gonna say, if you'd like to tell us what you think about Halo Infinite or any of the other things we talked about on the show, you can email us at somedirtplaygames@gmail.com or podcast@somedirtplaygames. Lou says get on so she can summon us. And we'll be right there. Um, what is it? Subscribe to us on SoundCloud and podcast places and give us ratings and all that good stuff. We have a Patreon if you'd like to support us there at patreon.com/games. That's everything I have. But do you have anything else you want to promote?
The one thing I did want to mention is that this week we're doing movie night in the Akupara Games Discord at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. We're watching the 1989 Tim Burton Batman because that's what
Ooh.
we watched Beetlejuice last time, and someone said, I think it was Mingo Neshoba, he was like, let's do Batman next, like continue the Tim Burton train, and we're continuing the fucking Tim Burton train. So if you're not doing anything this Friday at 4 Pacific, 7 Eastern, come hang out.
All right. Awesome. Well, with that, I'm going to say until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.